Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the BFA class review series. My name is Mr. Couchy, and I will lay out for you some of the changes affecting Blood Death Knight going into battle for Azeroth. Although we are close to the end of beta and into pre-patch, some of this is still subject to change, so don't take everything said here as law. The Blood DK followed a very similar pattern throughout Legion as it usually does. Based on how haste levels are and their self-healing model works, beginning of expansion Blood DKs are trash, but by endgame become self-sustaining vampires capable of healing not only themselves, but the group with the power of their artifact weapon. Providing group leech and having a mass grip are the two reasons Blood DKs dominated the Mythic Dungeon scene. I wouldn't say Blood is overpowered, just a product of its model, so how could Blizz address this without a drastic workover? Dark Sucre. When you kill an enemy that yields experience or honor, your next death strike within 20 seconds is free and heals for an additional 10% of max health. Death's Advance. For 8 seconds your movement speed is increased by 30% and you cannot be slowed below 100% of normal speed, and you are immune to forced movement effects and knockbacks. Passively, you also cannot be slowed below 70% of normal speed, and the cooldown has been changed from none to 45 seconds. Raise Ally. Your battle res other players for 60% and 20% mana. Cost change from none to 30 runic power. Dancing Rune Weapons. Cooldown has been changed from 3 to 2 minutes. Gorfiend's Grasp. Shadowy tendrils coil around all enemies within 15 yards of a hostile or friendly target, pulling them to the target's location. That loss of 5 yards is definitely noticeable. Heart Strike. You instantly strike the target and one other nearby enemy, causing physical damage and reducing enemies' move speed by 20% for 8 seconds. That also generates 5 bonus runic power. Icebound Fortitude reduces all damage you take by 30% for 8 seconds. Marrow Rend. You smash the target, dealing physical damage, and generates 3 charges of Bone Shield. Bone Shield surrounds you with a barrier of whirling bones, increasing your armor by a number and your haste by a 10%. Each melee attack against you consumes a charge and lasts 30 seconds or until all charges are consumed. Your Mastery. Blood Shield. Each time you heal yourself with Death Strike, you gain 16% of the base amount healed as a physical damage absorb shield, and also increases your attack power by 1%. And finally, Veteran of the Third War. Stamina is increased by 60% and armor by 15%. Not a lot of major changes, but definitely some minors, but there have been some changes to your talents. Blood Mirror, Blood Tap, Heart of Ice, March of the Damned, Spectral Deflection, and Tremble Before Me have all been removed. In their places, you get Consumption, where you strike all enemies in front of you with a hungering attack that deals physical damage and heals you for 100% of that damage. It's a much tamer artifact weapon ability that no longer provides group leech. Grip the Dead. Defile or Death and Decay reduces the move speed of enemies within its area by 90%, decaying by 10% every second. Hemostasis. Each enemy hit by Blood Boil increases the damage and healing done by your next death strike by 8%, stacking up to 5 times. Basically the Lego shoulders from Legion turned into a talon. Rune Strike. You strike the target for physical damage, and the cooldown is reduced by 1 second for every rune you spend, and it also generates 1 rune. Voracious. Death Strike grants you 15% leech for 6 seconds. Wraithwalk. You sidestep into the Shadowlands, removing all rune effects and increasing your move speed by 70% for 4 seconds. Taking any action cancels the effect, and while active, your movement speed cannot be reduced below 170%. Its cooldown, though, has been changed from 45 seconds to a minute. A couple of your other talents have changed a little bit. Anti-Magic Barrier reduces the cooldown of Anti-Magic Shell by 15 seconds and increases its duration and amount absorbed by 30%. Bloodworms. Your attacks have a chance to summon a Bloodworm. Bloodworms deal minor damage to your target for 15 seconds and then burst, healing you for 15% of your missing health. If you drop below 50%, your Bloodworms will immediately burst and heal you. Bone Storm. A whirl of bone and gore batters nearby enemies, dealing shadow damage every second and healing you for 3% of your max health every time it deals damage. It lasts 1 second per 10 runic power spent. Foul Bulwark. Each charge of Bone Shield increases your max health by 1%, basically a dead talent now. Mark of Blood. Places a Mark of Blood on an enemy for 15 seconds. The enemy's damaging auto attacks will also heal their victim for 2% of the victim's maximum health. Cooldown change from none to 6 seconds. Rapid Decomposition. Your Blood Plague and Death and Decay deal damage 15% more often. Red Thirst reduces the cooldown on Vampiric Blood by a second per 10 runic power spent. Rune Tap reduces all damage taken by 30% for 4 seconds. And finally, Tightening Grasp reduces the cooldown on Gorfien's Grasp by 30 seconds. There are some really cool talents here with some interesting swaps, but Blood DKs are still going to be a force in BFA. Their utility and self-healing model are still important enough to make them possibly the best dungeon tank. By the end of an expansion, Blood famously finds itself, as the shields the Mastery provide become massive, and Rune Tap providing flat damage reduction for longer really helps out the Blood DK's damage incoming. Hemostasis, Tightening Grasp, and Barrier still make Blood a sought-after tank for dungeons, and will be able to hold their own defensively in raids. How did you think Blood DK felt in Legion, and how do you think it will perform in BFA? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Thanks for sticking around, like and subscribe, and in case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.